Hello, welcome to the Cleveland School of Cannabis Green Hour. My name is Lisa Zwerner. I am the Director of Education here in Columbus. And today we are privileged to have Greg Selby, who is the Director of Cultivation Sciences with SCYNCE LED Horticulture Lighting. And we are going to get a lot of knowledge on cultivation lighting, and we'll be able to pick his brain. So welcome, Greg, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here. Hi, everybody. How's it going? I guess I'll just start off with a little background on me so you guys can get a little idea where I'm coming from. My main background is soil ecology. I worked for Colorado State University for 15 years, doing soil ecology research, mapping soil food webs all around the world, climate change studies in the Arctic, all that kind of fun stuff. The whole time I was doing that, I was doing outdoor cultivation in Colorado. I then moved into facilities in Oregon, making indoor facilities, growing indoor cannabis in Hood River and in Portland. We set up multiple commercial facilities there, everything from lining out fertigation, irrigation to lighting systems to, genetics, the whole nine. So that's been my background for the past 8 years. And now I'm here with SCYNCE, and they're Director of Cultivation. So I'm running their research squad. We're doing a lot of research on photobiology when it comes to cannabis. We're doing studies on what people are working with as far as LED lighting into the future. Mostly just have the privilege to be playing with lights and cannabis on a daily, and just putting information out there. We're really strong on what we're putting out for research on cannabis and what you guys can do. And our website's a great reference for that. So I'll be using that a couple of times today to answer some questions. If you guys want to just dig in through the website after we're done here, please feel free. Our info pages, we got VPD lineup up there, DLI, anything that you guys really want to dig into. I'm SCYNCE Cultivation on Instagram. So if you guys want to reach out to me afterwards direct on DM, feel free. You can also reach out to me on SCYNCE email at greg@SCYNCE.ag. So yeah, with that, we can kind of dive in. I'm going to kind of keep it kind of loose today. I mean, if anybody wants to start off with some questions, we can go that route. And so go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, so I've been chomping at the bit here, as you could tell here. So, there's a lot of students that, have a little bit of background in it, and some students that have absolutely none. So like when it comes to lighting, there's a lot of nomenclature that's just really mind-boggling. And it seems like, half the time could be spent as far as learning about LEDs and lighting is just learning the jargon. So is there any way you can, kind of break down some of the differences between, the PPF, PPFD, PFD, even par readings and lumens and all of that too, because these are all, names and things thrown at, the students on the daily, especially with LED lighting. You pop on Amazon, type in LED grow lights, and everything looks awesome if you're looking at what they post on the description, right? So, I was hoping maybe you could kind of explain some of the differences between all that and what makes your light, different than, some of those other ones that are on Amazon that are the bane of your and I's existence.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, just to start off, what we prefer to use when we talk about lighting is PPFD, which is photosynthetic flux. Yeah.
It's the most specific, right?
Yeah, that's what we prefer to talk about. That is what we find to be the most accurate measure for how much light is actually getting to the plant and is actually creating some sort of photosynthetic reaction in the plant. So, but
that's a dynamic number, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the U-mol number that we look at for the most part. But to your point, over the years, especially when it was in the old HPS lighting, CMH lighting, you heard a lot about lumens, which our favorite thing to say, and I'm sure some of you guys have heard this before, is lumens is for humans. That's not actually a measure of light that's going to tell you how much photosynthetic activity is happening with the photons hitting the plant. So lumens is a great base. I get a lot of growers that start there for me. And, if you're looking for a general read on how much light am I getting my plants, you can do conversions from lumens over to PPFD, over to PAR. They're not accurate, but they get you an idea. So when it comes to home growers, things like that, I'll normally talk to them. I mean, they're not going to be spending, $500-600 on an accurate meter. So any kind of measurements there is good, but we normally try to get rid of lumens right off the bat. PAR is a more reasonable way to look at things. If you're not going all the way to PPFD,
Sure.
then at least you're still talking about photosynthetic activity. That's a pretty common one that a lot of light companies will use, just because it's really easy for those numbers to look really high, really fast.
Exactly. Yeah, because it just has to fall between 3 and 700, correct? Or
Right,
4 and
exactly.
700, right?
Yeah. So that's a real common one that a lot of companies will use nowadays. And then the other thing that comes into play, you'll see a lot is efficiency numbers on LEDs when you look at those. And so that's another way that a lot of companies will say we're really efficient for the amount of power output. But if you look at what you're actually putting to the plant and what the cells are actually using, it's not the most accurate number in the game for sure. So normally we like to look at PPFD. That's another one we can hop on the website after this if we want and really dig into. We have a great little outlay of how each one of those numbers play out and why you want to be looking for the PPFD numbers on a light fixture. Yeah.
If you
And
want
that
to go
makes
ahead and
sense.
share your screen and do that before we jump to the next topic, that would be perfect.
Okay, I'm still disabled on screen sharing apparently.
Is it scienceled.com?
Yep.
Okay, give me 1 second, I think.
There, now I got it.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, because you know, I work at a hydro store, and I've worked at hydro stores across the country for like the last 10 years. So, you know, I've sold all kinds of different types of lighting, but LEDs is always the one that trips people up, because I've always told people they're the best at selling themselves, because they take a bunch of numbers, you know, they put big ones up there and they don't really tell you what they mean. So, you know, it always sounds good. You know, when somebody talks about, well, I got this 3,000 watt LED off of Amazon for $250. How's this $1,000 light going to do any better when it's 3,000 watts?
Right.
And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and a lot of the times, you know, we've run into that in the past. We have our Dragon SL model. We used to have a 1,200 watt version of that, but we've actually been able to kind of wrangle that into a 600 watt fixture and get the same amount of light output. So, you know, you get your savings on your wattage out of the wall, and you're still getting all the activity that you need. Let me pull this up here. So this is our little, we have this great little blog on here about how all this stuff kind of lays out. You see the humans and lumens measurements here. You're talking about PPF is, you know, that's a range, again, that's where you're conducting photosynthesis. So this is really something that if you wanted to dig in deep on what we're kind of scratching the surface on, I would recommend kind of scrolling through this here. This is something that me and the CEO put together on how we think that, you know, a lot of what we're talking about here on lighting companies kind of coming at you with just big numbers to make them look really efficient and really impressive, when at the end of the day, you break down what they're actually putting out and it's just not going to reach what you need. Especially like you're talking about those Amazon cheap lights, definitely run into that a lot. And coming from an LED lighting industry, those kill us because people get a hold of those lights and then they'll come back and say, hey, LEDs don't work,
right?
Which, you know, and so what I'll pull up real quick is just our real optics page here. So what we're looking at here, and I'm hoping everybody can see my screen right now. We have the bare LED over there on the side, and that's how the bare LED will throw a light out. That's pretty average for any of your quantum boards or cobs. It's that nice round kind of exposure to the way the light's coming out. Over here, we have what we're using for our optics, where we're actually spreading the light out a little more. You can see the difference between the round. Cool. Yeah, and then this is our 70-degree linear lens here, which is our newer lenses, which actually throws 120 degrees in one direction and then 70 in the other. So what you end up with is, you know, as far as the, see them down here at the bottom. Here's a look. So there's the basic pattern of an LED. Here's kind of what you get from an HPS. And then this is what you get from a lensed light. So it's just a difference in spreading the light out. So as much as you can talk about PPFD numbers, U-moles, and everything else, trying to spread that out. I mean, when you're looking at a real round shot like that, you get a lot of burn straight down on the plants. So try to spread that light out a little more and make it a little more even canopy. That's what a lot of the LEDs are running into right now. You know, you'll see a lot of these guys, a lot of the companies will give you 1,200 watts, but you got to be 34 inches off your canopy, 28 inches off your canopy.
At least.
Because you're getting so much burn. So how much of those photons are actually reaching the plant and just wandering out into your tent or into your grow room? You know,
wasted energy at that point.
Exactly. So on top of knowing your PPFD numbers, it's important to see your light throw so that you're not wasting a bunch of time and energy just trying to light up your aisles and trays and whatever else you're not using.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that makes sense because that adds to the efficacy of it too, but it's so varied that those are factors that they can't possibly put in on the box.
Right.
Now,
100%.
there's something that I will never forget about your lighting. The first time I was introduced to your lighting, I'd seen that you guys were advertising that it was waterproof. And I seen someone put one of your lights in a kiddie pool while on, and it lived. Can you explain kind of like why? I'm amazed by that? There's a lot of people that might not think that's so cool, but like that says a lot about your confidence in your product. Can you explain like what, why? Obviously you wouldn't want to ever throw your fucking light in the pool, but why would you go to those great lengths to make sure that your product will withstand, whereas there's probably not a single other company that could throw their light in a pool and it still exists?
Sure. Yeah. So, the idea there, coming from a commercial background myself, and then I came into the cannabis industry mostly working under IPM. So I'm the guy that's coming in
spray
and
everything
trying to,
down.
we're spraying stuff. And so I started out, I was a Fluence tester and grower for a long time with those guys. They came into the
Cool.
game LED with the first multi-bar light. Really was the first one to start kind of looking at spreading out those quantum boards into multiple strips and not getting those hot spots. But
first ones that convince a lot of people that LEDs were really starting to
exactly.
lead the
Yeah,
way
we
too.
got to give Fluence credit for that for sure. So off the bat, I was told, you can't do IPM sprays under these lights. And so immediately we saw a problem there. You're going to have in a commercial grow, you're going to need to do, especially in Oregon, where you have PM everywhere and bugs and anything else. It was an issue.
What are you going to do? Pay your crew to climb up and take them off just so you could spray and put them back
Right. Yeah. And over the years with CMHs and everything, we've done weird covers with shower caps and whatever else. I mean, it's always been an issue. We've always had to deal with it. But when I came to SCYNCE, they already had this technology where everything was waterproof. And the lenses not only keeping you so that you had that nice spread on it, you also had that opportunity to cover those. We were actually doing some tests yesterday with some lights on sulfur burns. Pretty standard in the industry to do sulfur burns, wettable sulfur. The damage that you actually see from uncoated diodes, a lot of the companies out there, the cheaper companies, won't
Never
even
considered
coat their
that.
diodes. Yeah. So there's damage that can be done. You talk about Fluence and people like that, and they have a silica coating over their diodes, so they have some protection there. But when you're talking about those Amazon boards, then you're all bets are off at that point. So what SCYNCE was looking at is a durable light that can be hung up and replaced. What we saw coming down the line is, like the votes going on in California, and Massachusetts and places where basically if you're not growing with LED, you're not going to be able to meet energy standards anymore. Right. So we saw that a lot of people were going to start hanging these and racking close to their canopy. It's going to be a concern that they're getting wet all the time. So they were just forward thinking in that, coming from the background where a lot of our lighting came from Rigid, which is an outdoor off-road company for lighting trucks far into the distance. So durability was already a concern. So it just kind of moved right into the cultivation and the horticulture lighting.
Isn't that kind of the beauty of the whole industry, though? I mean, how many other things have you seen adapted from other, professions that just kind of get thrown right into here and work perfect?
Yeah, exactly. And that, that's the great thing about, sometimes those of us in cannabis think we're kind of like inventing new things. But if you look at horticulture and, aquaponics and lighting, and people have been doing this for a really long time. And sometimes we're in our own little bubble, and it's nice to reach out and just see what other professions have already figured out for us.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So like I said, that's something that always stuck with me because, it says a lot about forward thinking is the best thing, that I could come up with in my mind. Like, why the hell would someone spend so much money to make sure that their product can stand up? But from a commercial standpoint, that's one thing that I never even really considered, sulfur burns, because that's not necessarily a huge problem where we're at geographically, but absolutely necessary elsewhere. So, again, talking about that little bubble here, I'm in my own little bubble and I didn't even think about anything like that. So, again, that says a lot about, what you get for that price difference, because that's something that I always have to explain to a lot of newer growers, especially if they want to invest in LED lighting. If you want to go with cheap lighting, just go with cheap, HIDs at that point. But if you're trying to go LEDs, there's so many things to get wrapped up in that you really just have to know what you're looking at and know what you're getting for the difference in cost. Because, you know, if somebody's looking at $150 light and $1,000 light and they both have the same numbers, but it's not explained why they match up, and, you know, one could be given an inch away from the light, one could be given 28 inches away from the light and have a matching number, and boom, there you go. So, you know, to bring it, you know, around, it just says a lot about, you know, what kind of standard your company holds. And that's the kind of stuff that you don't really see in an industry like this anymore, because, you know, you see how a lot of the quality of goods have kind of gone down. They've gotten nicer in packaging, but, like, you know, fans, for example, how long can you get out of an oscillating fan that isn't, you know, a fan you had to pay a couple $100 for anyways? I mean,
right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a lot of it. I mean, it looks like, I mean, with everything going on, we won't have an MJ BizCon this year, but last year at MJ BizCon, we were a booth in 78 other lighting companies, all doing LEDs on the floor with us. Yeah, and, you know, you walk around and you see a lot of that, like we were talking about earlier with Fluence bringing the multi-bar, and a lot of people are just doing that spider version of that light, and that's working for them. And it's easy for the home growers to adapt that, and big facilities see that and they see the price point and they're happy with it. But trying to move to that next step where you can start controlling your spectrum and you can start, you know, really having these lights for 5 years with no concerns on, you know, strips going out or any kind of driver issues, is really important to us, that we have the longevity. I mean, some of these guys have been running the same CMHs for 10 years, you know, throw a new bulb in it, and it's still a great fixture. So where some of these other
going
LED
up against that expectation already.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we really came into this looking to be a large production facility lighting company. It's great. We love our home growers, and they really drive our local markets for sure.
Absolutely.
We wanted to be able to look at this as a production option, because the ability for you to, we'll get into the tuning as well, but the ability to tune under a production setting when it comes to different cultivars and everything else is that also changes a lot of what you can do with your crops in-house. For sure.
Absolutely. So the first time that I personally got to touch one and mess with one, the app is so intimidating with how you can configure everything that I just put it down before I screwed up my friend's light.
Sure, yeah, and I know if you've seen the newer versions of the app, we actually, because of that, we just dropped in an auto set for veg and flower. So now you can just hit that button and it's going to set you up for flower. It's going to hit you up for veg. And then if you want to go with the full tuning, we let you know that you're getting into an R&D level tuning of a light. And you can really start pulling things in and out as you see fit. So luckily with the research squad, we've been doing some really crazy stuff, really seeing what we can do, pushing around morphology. We're working on a couple projects right now where we're using our newest light, our Dragon Alpha, actually has the ability to just run the 730 channel of the far red independently on the light. So that new
lighting.
Yeah, that new ability is doing a bunch of phytochrome transition stuff. We're doing a bunch of playing around with changing petiole elongation, terpene production, all that kind of fun stuff.
Oh yeah, man, that's really crazy when you start thinking about it.
Hey, Greg, I was going to ask if you would mind pulling up maybe a couple sample pictures of your lights that you have right now.
Yeah, sure, for sure. Let's see here.
Also, while you were talking about the new updated app, so when you start, you know, messing around with all of your numbers and everything, do you have any sort of peripheral or anything on the app that records that for you, or?
No, unfortunately not yet. We are working on getting that done. That's something that a lot of people have asked for. I mean, it's to the point now where it's a lot of onboard, you know, how much can you cram into an app? How much can you cram onto a light?
True. Yeah, without making it like a subscription based thing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll pull up a picture here of the Alpha if it'll let me run a little slow. So that's our newest version. That's that's a single strip light. This is kind of a change from the Dragon SL is what we used to run. This has the new 70-degree linear optics on it there. You can kind of see those are a little different than our older round optics.
So what does that make the spread then with that weird shape?
So that's the one that does, let's see, where is that? Right here. So that's this shape here. So this is our 120 and this is the 70. So it's a little tighter. What we like to prefer with this fixture, this is really good at running in an array and not lighting your aisles. It's got a real like straight down kind of, we found that the 70-degree optics, when you have them at a higher height, so this light was designed for greenhouse supplemental lighting for the most part. So it's got a real narrow body shape to it, and it's meant to be hung really high over your canopy. This is really going to drive you down into the canopy a little bit better.
Gotcha. So like square footage, like what is that? A 2x4-ish, more than that?
So
less than
yeah,
that?
so the old SL, the Dragon SL was is
Mhm.
a 5x3 coverage at 18 inches, and the new
Gotcha.
Dragon Alpha is a 5x3 coverage at 28 inches, 36
Gotcha. Okay.
inches. So you get that same coverage with a higher hang,
That makes
which is
sense.
great for people coming in from older grows that they're retrofitting with that
Mhm.
high hang, and they're not ready for that really slam down kind of look that
Oh,
maybe the
absolutely.
multi-bar lights will give you.
That's super cool. Yeah, no, going back to the fine tuning of it. So, I mean, I know that's definitely getting into some crazy territory there, but like, have you had a lot of people, do they normally just kind of hit it with a buckshot approach and start pressing buttons and see what happens? Do they seek guidance from you? How does that normally play out with when it
Yeah,
gets into
so
your
we
growers'
have
hands?
I've had both. We have
That's what I
normally
was wondering.
what I suggest normally is when you open the box up, put it on the full spectrum when you hit the flower button, basically it just
Mm,
takes all your sliders to 100%. And
gotcha.
really then you just play with intensity depending on the
Okay.
area and how close you are. Like here's the Raging Kush fixture. It's a little
Mm,
different because it's a multi-bar light. It has the ability to do that cross beaming, which brings the
okay.
PPFD up even higher.
Right.
So
More
something like a
consistent
Raging,
also, I imagine.
yeah. So that runs a little different than something that's a single bar option. That you can get a little closer to the canopy and it throws the light out a little more. So for most people, I say run it full bore out, see what it does, and then start adjusting, as you see what your cultivars
Mm,
need. We're working right now on a bunch of recipes for these lights that are basically crop steering. So we've done
super
enough
cool.
testing now that we're starting to see if you run these a little cooler, you can keep your internode spacing tighter. If you run them a little
Mm.
warmer, you can set on your buds a little quicker. So really what you're asking me is kind of a complicated question when I talk to a lot of my
Sure.
growers
Well, that's
because
kind of what I was getting at, though. What kind of effects can they see,
right,
off of
yeah,
these
yeah,
little
exactly.
tweaks?
So the first thing I ask any grower that comes up to me and asks me about these lights is what media are you running? Because that
Mm,
makes a huge difference. I have guys that like do living soil, which is my background. So
mm,
I'm happy to talk to them about that the
sure.
most. But a living soil, what we found a lot is that if a lot of our recipes that run a little cooler are set up to kind of push that root to shoot ratio
Hmm.
early in your
Okay.
grow. So if you're running a hydroponic system or rock wool or cocoa, you want to really onset
All right.
that root structure first and then let your flower go. When it comes to
Gotcha.
living soil, you got that low and slow approach. We actually have you tune a little warmer so that you set
Okay.
those buds a little faster and you don't spend quite as much time on root production because you got the room, the plant's going to have the time. It's really going to be able to fill out that nice pot, or bed, whatever you're
Yeah.
growing in. So,
So
and
does it
then
make any difference with cocoa or anything like that too, or?
yeah, well, so when it comes into cocoa, that's when again we can start getting even more finite about it. I'll talk
Sure.
to cocoa growers. Some of them run their cocoa very hydroponic style, rock wool. They'll
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
run,
Yeah.
they'll clean out the systems with res clears, shock, whatever, no microbes, no anything. And then I have other cocoa growers that basically set their cocoa up like a soil system. So
Yeah.
cocoa can
That's
get
what I do.
yeah, exactly. So cocoa can get even more finite on how you want it. And that's why it's so important to have the ability to adjust your lighting
Yeah.
depending on what you're doing, because you may want to, if you're running a very soil-based, cocoa right now, you may a year from now be like, look, I'm sick of running bacteria. I'm sick of running fungus.
Mm.
Just going to run a straight hydro system. Then you can tune for that as well. So the ability to
Makes
have
it more
that
dynamic.
fixture, yeah, work with you, because I know a lot of us kind of changed our growing habits over the years as we learn things and we
Quickly
see
too.
things. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I really like about having these fixtures is every time I do some crazy thing that I don't want to grow like I used to anymore, I have the ability to kind of switch everything around.
Yeah. I've seen some questions pop up. So Ben, to answer your question, cocoa is a coconut coir or a ground up coconut husk that you use as a growing medium. And oh yeah, and then Wally just answered it for him. Thanks, Wally. Cool beans. Yeah, so and it's important to make those tweaks because I mean I understand, and this is what I tried to point out to my students too. Even if you only have the ability to run light, if you could tweak it and maximize that, if you can get an extra ounce out of your one plant, and you can multiply that same knowledge and get 1,000 plants to get an extra ounce off of it. I mean, now we're really talking. So, when you
Yeah.
are even making differences in yield of, like I said, just an ounce, that's where it really starts to,
Yeah. So what
count.
we're seeing for the most part, and for what you're saying, what we're seeing a lot right now with the research squad is if we're not beating your previous, your yields, what we are seeing is a shift in that A to B ratio where further down the stem, you're getting buds that are usable. So
Right.
even if you're saying, hey, I was getting 2 pounds per light before, I'm getting 2 pounds per light now, a lot more of that 2 pounds per light is A quality bud that's going out,
Right.
and then what else we're seeing is actually shortening of flowering times, especially with the cryptochrome and the phytochrome transitions. We're seeing a lot of new research coming out with the blue channels early on in the morning to fire up the stoma, get the plants cranking. And then with the phytochromes at the end of the day, activating those to put you to sleep quicker. It's actually speeding up crop time. So if you can produce an ounce extra per plant and I can shave 10 days off of a crop, that buys you a whole nother turn every year. So those all compound,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think that's what a lot of people get lost on too, is how difficult it really is to scale a lot of things that you learn on the hobbyist level to that commercial level. I mean, because sure, you could plug and play, but think of how expensive it would be to put 4x8 tables in there instead of custom built tables or Beto buckets or whatever you decide to use.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's a big benefit if you can short. I mean, I have one of my guys out in Florida that's running GMO, which we all know is a notoriously long crop, and he's able to shave 10 to 15 days off of a GMO. That almost makes that a production level crop at that point.
Yeah.
Where before you wouldn't even have that in a facility because it's not going to match up with any of your rates of production anywhere else in the grow. So it's really being able to bring these cultivars that I've lost over the years because they're just not good production cultivars back into the game and back into a more craft kind of push again, instead of these like, hey, everybody could just throw that under a light and grow it super easy.
Yeah. And that's what I think is most appealing about your guys' lights. There's a lot of extra care and thought and forethought that goes into these lights than even a lot of the other, even still really nice brands that I see too. For example, a brand that's local here to Ohio, Horticulture Lighting Group, they make good lights. They make really good lights. They're affordable in that regard. But speaking from a quality standpoint, having held one of your Raging Kushes and having, one of their 550R specs, it's night and day. I mean, even in just weight alone, you feel it,
yeah. And, we are, the nice thing about the Kushes is it's looking like we're going to have the next gen of Kushes out at the end of the year, which is moving towards this new technology that we have in the Alpha and the Kale, where you're not losing any power as you tune through the light. So a lot of other lights on the market have spectrum tuning abilities. And even the older Kushes, we had 3 drivers. So basically the driver's pushing the power on the light. Each one would run an independent channel. So as you tune out a channel, you'd lose some of your wattage in the lights. What we've come up with in the past year is a single driver to pull all of these spectrums in and out. So if you have a 600 watt light, you always have 600 watts, no matter where that spectrum's tilting. So you still have all your power over the plants, because right now, if you tune one of the older, like a Dragon SL or a Raging Kush, you lose some PPFD as you tune out. But the new ones and the new Raging Kushes, that won't be the case any longer. So that's really brand new technology that we're excited to get out there. Yeah, super stoked about that.
So is that like proprietary that you developed, or is this like driver technology that already existed?
No, that's our in-house driver. We're going to be the only ones. Well, we're already the only ones on the market with our veg light, the Raging Kale and the Dragon Alpha. Those are the only ones on the market right now that have that ability to not lose any wattage as you tune through your spectrum. So the only
$1 million idea, brother.
If you have a single channel on like a 730 far red, there's wattage lost just because you're only pushing one channel. But if you have all the lights on you're still working with 600 watts the whole way through.
No, and that's awesome, because that's not something that's very well explained either. When you have these dimming features and custom, light spectrum features on some of these lights, even higher end ones, going back to the HLGs, they have a dimmer switch, but there's no fine tuning in spectrum, much less able to still put out 100% with whatever spectrum you choose. That's excellent. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and speaking to, we run all of our lights through a Ganio photometer, which is a great machine, and that's on the website too. And
never even heard of it.
Yeah, it twirls the lights around 360 degrees, and we get readings all the way around so that we know Because what we know more than anything is, everybody's always looking for the Samsung chip or, the Osron chip, and that might not always be the most efficient chip for the light we're using. So we do
Makes
triple and quadruple test everything. So we actually had the HLG, the new one, the 650R in the Ganio, and the thing puts out an amazing amount of light, and they definitely have that, and their spectrum's really solid. But when it comes to, other things that you want to look at when you're talking about production level light, as far as, UL ratings, waterproofing, that kind of stuff, then you get into some different things. But I mean, yeah, totally, 100%. HLG is one of the ones that if somebody does ask me what other company to go with, I normally point them that direction. Those guys do a great job. So yeah, it's nice to have other LEDs coming on the market that aren't the blue purples.
Yes.
And,
oh my God.
and actually work like they're supposed to. So.
Right.
Yeah, Greg, I think someone wanted to find out what the coverage area of the Raging Kush was.
The coverage area of the Raging Kush. So this is a 4x4 fixture. And here's the PPFD. Let me get it off there. That's the 4x4 map for the PPFD there. You can kind of see the coverage area. We normally recommend that hung about 9 inches above the canopy. So this is a close hanging light. This is great for home growers, tent growers. And I actually have a coupon code for everybody on here if anybody wants to hop on. I believe it's like 10% off. But yeah, you hop on. So this has the 120 optics on it there. And you can see in the middle of the route there, I mean, you're hitting, 1150, 1200, but on the outsides, you lose a little bit, you're around 800. But that's when we start talking about, depending on the cultivar you're running, talking about DLI, talking about how much light these plants actually need, because for the longest time, I need, 1200 watts from the wall.
Throw it all.
I need to hit them. Yeah, exactly. And, from my experiences over the years, there's some cultivars that just don't need that. We're one.
100%.
So it's definitely, it's definitely, and so that's that map right there that you're looking at is at 100% intensity. You can always drag that intensity down a little bit. I'm the kind of guy, I like my plants around 800 ppfd, so a lot of these science lights are just too much power for me.
I see. Well, especially once you start getting them close. I mean, if you know what you're working with, it's you know when enough is enough.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we might have, no, we just have that down there. So yeah, so that's the look on that one.
When going back again to the integrity of the company, there's only a handful of companies that even publish those charts for you, like at least that are easy to find.
Yeah. Yeah. We really try to be as transparent as possible. I mean, if anybody comes to us, we will go ahead and light map a room for you based off of these numbers. So we'll lay out the lights, let you know where we think you're going to have gaps. If it's not the fixture for you, what fixture you need to kind of be looking at. So, I mean, we want to make sure everybody's successful, because that's our biggest thing. I mean, we want to make sure
it's
that
the beauty of the
everybody's
industry,
happy.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody eats when you succeed.
Yeah, 100%. And especially since, a lot of the guys that I talk to nowadays that are in these larger facilities are really, they're concerned to switch over from an HID, CMH light. And
I mean, strictly from an investment standpoint.
And there's a bit of a learning curve when it comes to lighting an LED room.
Glad you mentioned that.
It's definitely, and that's when I bring up the VPD charts that, they look a little different for LED lighting than they do for HPS CMH lighting. Number one, you're not producing any heat from the fixture. I mean, there's heat coming out. I shouldn't say any heat, but you're not producing the level of heat that you do with these high intensity discharge lights. So
there's no need to transpire as much.
Right, exactly. But what that means is you slow down your plant's metabolism if you're not keeping your room temp up. So when you're running an LED, you want to be looking at a leaf temperature around 81, 82 degrees, which that's really hard for a lot of old school growers to be comfortable with.
Of course.
And also you want to knock your humidity up a little bit, because what all this blue in these lights is doing is it's increasing your stomatal size and the densities of the stoma on the leaf. So you're transpiring a lot quicker than you would with the old school lights. So you're actually pulling water through the plants faster. So in order to kind of counteract that, you bring your humidity up in the room, and it kind of makes it so you're just not pulling a bunch of water through and leaving a bunch of salts or whatever you're leaving behind. So there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to LED lighting and how you're going to set up your room environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought it up, because myself included, but a lot of people that switch over to LEDs, they do notice little changes in growth like that, like not going through nearly as much water or not going through nearly as much nutrients. but more
Yep.
water, you know, it
Yeah.
varies depending on their situation there. But yes, that's definitely something that I've noticed. And overall, I feel like switching over to LEDs, I go through a little less inputs. I mean, not just with electricity, but I mean, it trickles down even a little less nutrients because everything's tightened up, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
You
I think
mind if
there's
I
a
ask
lot.
a question?
Yeah.
In regards to learning curves, LEDs, what is the mag and phosphorus issues seem to come up with
Yeah.
LEDs?
For
And
sure.
I guess why and how to combat that besides feeding more mag and phosphorus?
Right. Sure. Yeah. No, and it's
Or
really
if that is.
it's a question I get a lot. And what we've been noticing from leaf tissue studies and nutrient studies that we've been doing with some of the larger grows is actually what's happening is a lot of these fertilizer, especially the salt fertilizer companies, they're packed so far heavy with nitrogen that as these plants are cranking, they're using a lot more of their macronutrients, but they're not the big three, right? They're like you're mentioning, calcium, that kind of stuff, magnesium. So what they're doing is they're leaving a lot of nitrogen behind, which is causing lockouts. So a lot of the times that's a concern. Other times what happens, especially when you're working with lights like the Dragon Alpha, where you have the 660 and the 730 nanometer reds working at the same time, you're activating two photo systems on full crank. So one's queuing off of that 660, that's photo system 1. Photo system 2 is queuing off of that 730. So you're actually increasing overall photosynthesis in your plant. It's actually speeding that whole process up. So a lot of the times what the deficiencies are coming from, and that's why I also lean on the tuning a little bit, is if people need to adjust their nutrient regime, and they can also adjust the amount of red that you're cranking on, so you're not turning your plants quite as fast. So those are the two major things that I normally point out, especially a lot of the times people, the CalMag, everybody reaches for the CalMag when they start seeing deficiencies. That's the first reach. Well, a lot of these companies, I mean, there's some that are doing it properly and they're getting the CalMag from the appropriate sources, but a lot of them come in with a lot of nitrogen. So it has a tendency to exacerbate that nitrogen lockout in the system already. So those are normally what I recommend. And sometimes it is just supplementing more CalMag. If you're coming from a guy that was running a really low PPFD in a room, didn't really have any CalMag issues, sometimes that is the key to the situation.
Thanks.
What is CalMag?
Calcium, magnesium.
Yeah, calcium, magnesium additive. It's pretty common, especially in our industry, to just have a bottle of that sitting in a grow. It's kind of everybody's fix-all. I normally recommend, like I was just saying, to break those out. There's other options. There's Epsom salts. There's, other calcium additives you can do. But we've worked with a lot of different fertilizer companies over the years, and some of them just have the ratios right to run under LEDs. Some of the older companies, just the ratios aren't there. There was all their work was done under HPS outdoor grows. So it's a little different when it comes to setting up under LEDs. Luckily, the fertilizer companies are catching up to us for the most part, because kind of the way the industry's going.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that with some, like GH, for example. There's definitely a lot of people that had weird issues when they switched over to LEDs and continued to use the 3-part. So that is funny you say that. You think a company like that though would put a little bit more money into keeping their cash cow, afloat.
Just like anything else, people get surprised by technology. If you looked at 5 years ago, you wouldn't be putting LEDs in a grow room, So, this is ramped up at a rate where a lot of people didn't realize it was coming around. And we're getting to the point now where more and more companies are realizing that they're going to have to start getting ready to put LEDs in. You talk to some of the older living soil guys and they're still, they're like, oh, you don't need a pH thing. You don't need to worry about your uptake. And you're like, that's fine if you're into the sun and a nice slow uptake and you got that slow growing season. But I'm trying to finish a 70-day crop in 55 days, I'm going to need to tune my nutrients a lot better, So there's a lot of that going on right now, but it's coming around. Luckily, we have a lot more companies that are doing really well under LEDs for sure. So I think we'll see an increase in that in the future.
Well, and I'm glad to see that, they started actually putting money into it and then it worked. Because thinking back to other technologies that have emerged and kind of died off, like plasma lighting, for example, or like induction lighting, which induction I felt was a scam from the beginning anyways. But you know, you see some of those other technologies and they sound good on paper, but, you know, they don't really perform anywhere close to what they claim. So it was nice that, you know, there actually is, you know, LEDs coming around. Because, I mean, 10 years ago, yeah, plasmas were like starting to come out and we thought those were going to be the new wave. And then we sold 6 of them and then that was it. You know what I mean? So we kind of had the same attitude about the LEDs when they first started coming around. So it's really nice to be able to have a chance to kind of pick, you know, a guy like you's brain, you know, because there's not really a whole lot of chances you really get to, you know, an opportunity to really talk shop with you like this. Because even if we meet you in like a, you know, a shop scenario or a trade show, you got 15 other people waiting to talk to you too. So, you know, it's nice to be able to actually pick your brain. Because, you know, easily one of the most confusing things when you start to really dive into the rabbit hole that is, you know, indoor cultivation is diving through all of the, you know, the jargon and all of the crap that comes with lighting. I mean, it's so much more complex than it used to be. We're not just using, you know, street lights anymore.
right. And, you know, and I always remind everybody of that. I mean, like I said, I did outdoor cultivation for years, and you can always put a seed in the ground and have a cannabis plant grow. That's something you can do. But, you know, when you're talking high production level and what we're kind of getting into where the industry is going, you know, we have to start borrowing some of this stuff from you know, horticulture that's been working for years. And
absolutely,
what we ran into early in LED lighting was, you know, what worked great on lettuce wasn't going to play well for cannabis. You know, you look at cannabis and no one's officially classified it as a shade avoiding plant, but I mean, anybody that's worked at the plant for any amount of time knows if it's not getting enough light, it gets stretchy, leaves get bigger, petioles get stretched out. So having that red brought in kind of affects, because you're simulating that kind of shade system with that, affects the plant morphology differently than a lot of other horticulture plants. So luckily, we're just starting to scratching the research on what we can do with cannabis. Canada has been a huge help lately. We've actually been seeing some great things. That what I've been seeing lately that's been a lot of pushback from my common knowledge is more reds in your mom room is actually helping produce better, more mature clones faster. Which for years it was CMH.
Yeah,
you want to run blue in your mom's, blue, that's what it is. But now that we actually have more people doing the research, we're actually seeing how these lights affect cannabis differently than it affects almost any other kind of plant. So we always like to think cannabis, like I said earlier, is a special plant. And in some instances, it really is. It really, the photobiology has a lot to be explored on the plant still.
Well, and you know, another point to be made is if we were talking about lettuce, would any of this research been done?
Right.
You know,
I mean, there's been a lot of, like, if you look at, you know, Apogee and Bruce Bugsby, and he's done a lot of great research.
I use his videos in my class.
Yeah, there you go. And he's done a lot of great, but he, you know, and I ran into this as working in higher education myself, is you cannot get federal grants if you're working with cannabis because it's still federally illegal. You know, luckily there's some leeway with hemp. But so a lot of this research that's been done with lightings is applied.
It's all private, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all been done on lettuce, tomatoes. You know, tomatoes was always the big, you know, comparison. Yeah. But what they're looking for, you know, and now it's even getting deeper because now I got guys that are doing hash washes and they're looking for trichome heads.
Oh man!
And they're looking for a different thing than somebody that's just trying to run how much weight can I get out of my grow. And then you get guys that are running, you know, super, you know, I want my bag appeal to be super frosty.
Right.
So what kind of grower are you? What's your system? Really starts coming into play the further we get into this whole thing.
It's a big rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Greg, I had a quick question for you. There's a lot of new students here, and you mentioned your tuning technology earlier in this presentation. Can you explain to the students why that's important to have that
let me get my
ability?
screen back up here, and I will show you what we have here. So hopefully everybody can see this. So this is our spectralizer. So basically, this gives you an idea of what you can do when you're tuning. So basically, the basic intro to this whole thing, and again, it's another rabbit hole we can dive down super deep, is how the plants react to these different spectrums. You know, so if I'm running something where, like we were talking before, I'm running a more of a veg setting, I may bring some of these reds down out of my light, and that's going to increase how much blue and how much of this green kind of yellow spectrum you're picking up. And then when I'm into flower, if I want to stimulate those photosystems to get it cranking a little higher, I can bring those reds back up. So really, that's a huge part of this whole system.
Yeah.
Is being able to tune for what you're looking for out of production. So the one thing we don't have in our lights is the UVA, UVBs.
Is there a reason for
and that's
that?
something that hash producers really talk about a lot on getting those trichome heads stacked, that kind of stuff. But yeah, so each one of our lights is going to have this ability to tune. And the kale is actually a great example. If I can bring that up here real quick.
So using these features, though, I mean, realistically, you could grow any crop under these lights as well, though, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I have guys that are doing amazing stuff with the kales on indoor tomato production. Indoor,
I could see that for sure.
Yeah, especially when everything with COVID kind of started this year. We got a huge explosion in home growing. Tents coming out. I'm going to start producing my own food. What can I do to start growing for my own family? That became really on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. So we set up a lot of systems in February, March that are just for home cultivation. I've been doing a lot of work with cantaloupes. Have always fascinated me because overall they're not a great indoor crop production.
Not at all.
Because they produce a small amount of fruit, right? But if you could get the spectrum tuned right to get them to flower faster, flower harder, and you can crank the nutrients through, maybe we can make that, being here in Arizona, we get a lot of cantaloupe production already anyway. So just kind of always on the mind. But yeah, so this works for anything, and how these systems affect different plants is different than cannabis too. So really it's important to get this technology out in people's hands and start getting feedback. I mean, that's been the biggest thing, and what I've really been trying to do, because as much as we're a fairly new company, so we don't have the millions of dollars it takes to do this research in a really controlled setting. So I'm really count on my growers and the general public to kind of reach out to me and be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing when I'm running with tomatoes, or this is what I'm seeing when I'm running with lettuce. Those are really the most common indoor ones that we see. But we're doing a lot with a group out in Louisiana is doing cut flowers indoors. So basically stuff, for like flower arrangements, that kind of stuff. So
and if you can manipulate that, make them flower faster, set faster, there's many reasons I could think where that could benefit them.
Yeah, with the technology, also with the app and the timers, you can have lights, and that's where you can kind of slide into like these DLI calculators, where if you're running an outdoor crop,
my mouth is watering right now.
When do you need the lights and where? And this works for. You can come in and say my crop might need, like for cannabis, you need 500, 1,000, 1,500. It's like the sun. But it lays out different for every crop, and it lays out, especially if you're outdoor, on what your supplemental is going to be. So
absolutely,
that's where that comes into play as well.
Super cool. I've never seen so much information, like useful information crammed on there. I mean, if you kind of were starting to get into the commercial game and didn't know where to go, I mean, this is one of those websites where it really makes it a lot easier for you to kind of really figure out what you're working with and what's realistic and, geographically where you are too, because I've definitely personally had a lot of friends come out from here in Ohio and try to grow in Arizona and Oregon and, Colorado, and they're completely different climates and they combat completely different things out there. It's really nice to see that there's actually, information out there that could, hell, they might have actually kept those boys out there that I'm talking about if this kind of information was out.
Yeah, and the website is, and that's why I have it up today. And I've had slides and other things over the years, but we have made an effort to anything that we've come together on and say, hey, this is good science. This is something we want people to know. It's on the website. There's a lot of people that use our website as a reference to come back to. And, not all of this science is strictly from us. I mean, this is research science. This is peer-reviewed stuff. I mean, definitely all the work that some of like Fluence, some of the other LED companies have done before us has come into play here. And, like I said, luckily the research is really coming around for us right now. So we're super excited to see where we can take this and what we can start doing with different spectrums down the road.
Oh yeah, I'm super excited to see where you guys take it too. Cause I mean, my mind's already been blown this whole time. So, to see how deep you guys have really dove into it. So, I mean, I can't even imagine where you'll be in 5 years.
Yeah, yeah, and and what we're working on now, like I was saying, we're working on some crop steering recipes and things like
Mm,
that. Like my biggest thing over the years is I've had some strains that I really just love, but I don't like the way that the petioles are laying out. It's going to be a pain to trim, or it's just a mold concern. It's super tight.
right.
What can we do with pushing these cultivars around to make them, an easier one for us to run? So we have this little section here where you can actually download recipes that we've set up
Wow.
for you onto your phone and just run our recommended recipes. The ones we have on here now are a very seasonal based kind of
Mm,
look where we take you through like a spring, summer, fall kind of spectrum layout on what
mm,
you're looking for. And we're going to lay out, your spectrum for you there. Do that real quick. And then basically what your recipes are going to be set like on the app, and then kind of what you're looking at as far as your average PPFD for that setting. So these are all available to you on the app and just how that looks as well. So this is only going to get more robust. I'm hoping to get some of the new recipes out there, especially for the alpha
mhm.
soon.
Yeah, I can't wait till they come out. We had a couple questions pop up here too.
Sure.
Ben, we'll get to yours here in a second. Wally asked, how does your lighting system compare to those that you can grab at Lowe's or Home Depot? He said he purchased some at a huge discount, but haven't used them yet. And he also asked what CRI was, but that's color rendering index.
There you
Yeah, I'll let you
go.
take the reins on that one, Greg.
So yeah, so like we were talking earlier, I mean, you can grab those lights from Lowe's or Home Depots, and you can make a plant grow. Are you gonna get the quality out of that you get with a better lighting system? The answer across the board normally is no.
No.
You can really, you can do everything you can, stack a lot of lights in a room, get them close to your plants, play with them. But like we were talking earlier, with the bare LED diodes, you get a lot of burn, you get a lot of, so normally the ones at Lowe's, they're great for, hey, grow your house plants, kind of let them hang out in the corner, they're gonna be fine. But for cranking cannabis and really getting what you're looking for out of your final flower product,
Mhm.
they're not the best. And they just bring up more issues most of the time than they solve.
Yeah. Yeah, sour a lot of people too to some lighting technologies as well, I've noticed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, you go grab those, and even there's other options as well. I mean, you can get T5 bulbs now that are laid in with
Mm,
LEDs. That I actually would recommend something like that over just running in and grabbing something from Lowe's. I mean, it's really important to pay attention to the spectrum that you're hitting your plants with. Certain plants are going to react differently than cannabis to a spectrum. So a lot of the times it's about looking at that
yeah,
spectrum on the back of the box, making sure you're getting the light that you need, and making sure that I don't know how to put this delicately, that you have a quality product that you're
right.
working with.
Yeah,
LED lighting is definitely, you get what you pay for. There are some companies
100%.
out there that you're like, well, maybe you're overcharging a little bit, but for the most part, we're not trying to get a ton of money out of these lights. We're making sure that they work for you guys. So normally just keep that in mind when it comes to LEDs. You definitely get what you pay for when it comes to that.
Oh, for sure. Well, and again, going back to 10 years ago, selling a 1,000-watt grow light, would have cost you anywhere from $400 to $500, and then you got to replace out that bulb. And back then, bulbs was 100 to 120, depending on where you was going, and you
Right.
replace those out every 9 months to 12 months. So, when you really start thinking of it like that, it's really, not any different than what it used to be. I think it's just a lot for people to think of spending that up front, because four or
Sure.
500 doesn't sound bad, but when you start factoring in, yeah, you had that light for 10 years and at $120 a pop, it's another $1,000.
Right,
You could buy 2 of your
right.
lights.
Yeah, exactly. And I know the return on investment, the ROI is definitely the first thing that we start talking about.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of upfront costs, but and working in facilities with CMHs and all that
Oh
fun stuff
yeah.
over the years. The other thing that you really need to consider, especially if you're going to be, a head grower at a facility
Hmm.
or a manager at a facility, is you're going to have a staff. And
Yep.
how often do you want somebody up a 12, 13-foot ladder hanging over your canopy, changing out light bulbs? So I mean, there's some worker safety that comes into play a lot with
Hmm.
LEDs too, where it's kind of like you set them, especially with fixtures like us that are waterproof and you can get them wet and everything like that. You're
Foam them
working in,
down.
yeah, you're working in a grow room with a lot of people, and so it's really important when you have a crew under you that normally they're your crew. You want to take good care of them. You want to make sure they're taken care of. And I don't know how many times I've been hanging over a canopy and almost died in
Yeah,
my
I
years.
mean,
So
really,
there's
it's
that as
wasted
well.
money, wasted effort. Don't need to have that risk. Makes a whole lot of
Yeah.
sense. It really trickles down, once you start factoring in everything. And
Exactly.
it's kind of hard to put yourself in that perspective if you're only buying one of these lights. But, again, it starts multiplying really fast when you start thinking of, why you did things the way you did on your fixtures. And
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
again, that's what you pay for. I mean,
Yeah,
essentially.
and to that point too, I mean, when you're talking ROI and that kind of stuff for a home grower, if you're not looking at a large production facility, you're just talking to a home grower. I mean, just like I'll run, so this is my veg stand behind me now. It's empty because I just got back from vacation, but I don't have any sort of vents in or out on that tent at all. These lights don't produce enough heat that I need to worry exactly that I need to worry about. And half the time I'm running these lights on, 70, 80% intensity. So I'm not even hitting their full wattage potential most of the time. So the ROI comes into play really quick. I mean, if I had 2 HPSs in that tent, I would be or CMHs, I'd be pumping all kinds of fans in and out through there. So there's also that great benefit.
Yeah, a couple $100 just for that little tent right there.
Correct. Yeah. And so overall energy savings, you get that back really quick.
So you said that you don't need a ventilation process. Do you still need fans then with your lights, or?
Yeah, I mean, you still want to have the air movement. I mean, that's environmental. You still want to see the everybody dancing and having a good time. So you definitely want to be moving air. So these are the Kales here. Our Dragon models actually have fans in them, which when it comes to lights and fans, there's always that well, that's just another mechanical part that might be able to break. With our lights, they're all covered under a warranty and they're nice fans, so I can say that. But what the Dragons actually do is they'll pull the air from down low and up through the light to cool it. So you actually get a secondary fan rotation this way. And then, always recommend the air movement around the tent. But you just really don't need to pump out a bunch of heat. You don't need a bunch of air exchange. So if you're looking as a home grower for CO2 supplementation and stuff like that, when you look at those natural bags, like the CO2 enhancement bags and bottles, if you're circulating air in and out of your tents, they really don't raise your ppm enough that they're going to do anything really for you. But when you have the ability to kind of have that in your environment and not do a ton of air movement in and out of the tent, those even come into play in bumping your CO2 up a little higher.
And again, we can go down a real big rabbit hole there. Wade had a question. So and I'm glad he brought up this brand because this is a brand that I hear all the time in the hydro store. He said, what's the difference between, say, Black Dog LED and your guys' brand? Blurple, first of all.
That's a question we get a lot. Black Dogs, they're a little more old school. They run that kind of plurple technology, which is over the years we've seen that and Black Dog does make a lot of claims to fame on 4 pounds per light, and when it comes to us, we claim
factors to that.
We don't claim weight for that exact reason, because if I told you you're going to run a Girl Scout cookies and get 4 pounds per light, I'd be lying to you. It's not, so, but really what we've seen with the Blurple technology over the years, that was originally invented. The reason people did a lot of the Blurple stuff back in the day with LEDs is that was NASA's research that was going on. And that was how to grow a plant with the least amount of light, the most efficiently. But what we've seen is secondary hormone reactions from the greens and the yellows. Just because the plant's not absorbing those spectra doesn't mean that those aren't triggers for the plant. So say you have a real nice tight canopy and those green wavelengths go in, what they have a tendency to do is bounce off that leaf and then bounce around the tent, which actually triggers a hormonal response from the plants being like, hey, I have neighbors. I need to start working differently than if I'm just hanging out in a room by myself. So there's secondary actions that are happening with these lights that we're just starting to understand that pushes away from that kind of blurple technology that all the lights kind of started out with.
Yeah, and I feel like anybody who's used them, they only use one because they're really hard to work under. Everything looks perfect under them.
Yeah.
And you turn the light off and it can be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The Blurple is definitely the old school look. They do okay, but Black Dog, they're a good lighting company, and people that do know how to grow with them have success. And overall, we try not to say LED's LED, and especially coming from my viewpoint of working on climate change over the years and everything else. The more energy efficient you can get, if it works for you, it works for you. But
you can still win races in a Civic, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're definitely seeing a lot of difference between the spectral changes when it comes to our plants.
Cool. Well, Greg, that's awesome, man. You
ask a couple questions, or do you have to jump off?
By all means.
No, we can do a few more. Yeah, no, we can totally.
All
do
right, I'll try to make it quick. And what's up, Zach? This is Jason.
Hey, hey.
Shanti.
What's up,
What's up?
buddy? Oh, hey, man.
All right, couple questions. A, with foliaring under LEDs, right? You always should do it, or, HIDs, turn your lights off, do it in the morning. Is foliaring, is it more of a factor of heat and intensity? Is it just intensity that can damage your plants? Do I still need to dim my LEDs when I foliar?
Sure. Yeah. So, the first thing there is it depends on what you're doing a foliar with. If it's an oil-based foliar, you're going to get that optic effect of really channeling that light onto the plant through the optic of that oil droplet. But if you're doing just like a standard foliar, something that's like it depends on what you're doing. But yes, what I always recommend is definitely dimming the lights out a little bit. Just as 100% intensity, there's always some risk for some burn. But the nice thing about LEDs, especially our fixtures, you can just go ahead and dim those down to 30% and still use them as lighting to do your foliar, and that's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah.
Where you need to have an HPS off completely. You don't want to even mess with that. Make sure your plants are completely dry. So it's always recommended to at least reduce your intensity when you're doing that sort of work, for sure.
All right, cool. VPD, do you notice a variance between let's say living soil and hydro?
Yeah,
I've heard for living soil, you don't really, the chart's different. I mean, I don't fall to a T anyways, but like.
Sure. Yeah. And then, that's what I tell a lot of people when it comes to VPD, trying to hit those measures like perfectly. I mean, it gets complicated quick. It's always going to depend on your growing space. And that's just the bottom line is there's no silver bullet for everybody's growing space. You kind of got to design it to your needs. But yeah, there's a big difference when it comes to the media that you're using. And I think that a lot of other lighting companies don't realize those finite differences. And yeah, so the VPD is not quite as important. And when it comes to living soil, normally you got people in larger containers. You're not running these 3-gallon pots, 5-gallon pots. So VPD comes into play with that. Like I was talking about earlier, it's all about the amount of water you're dragging through your plants and at what speed. And you can also, use that kind of VPD in your humidity in your room to control those early morning and late night spikes, which is really where you get into play with a lot of PM issues and that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Which units did you just grab, Jason? Were those the Kales?
The Kush, the Raging Kush.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I do. Your lights are awesome. Because I actually am selling all my Fluence and buying.
That's what I was waiting to bring up, actually.
Yeah. The spider. I mean, I like the spiders from Fluence. They're good, but I like that you can adjust the spectrums. You just have so much more control, and I think I kind of just like your company a little bit better. But yeah. I have the Dragon SLs. They're awesome. The Kales are good. I'm using those. Yeah, I like the lights a lot.
That's great. No, that's great to hear. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I was a Fluence grower for years. I was kind of hopped on the bandwagon of those spiders early on. I set up a lot of racking system with the Fluence lights, and I always had to install secondary dimmers for exactly what you're talking about. That's why we kind of came into a SCYNCE knowing that we needed that already out ahead of us. But yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying the Raging Kush. I mean, the Kale, I always say, if anybody wants to get in the market for an LED and see what LEDs can do, the Kale's a great light at that price point to kind of pick up and start seeing how the optics play, what you can do with the tuning, and, what you can buy yourself in veg with the Kales as far as controlling your internode spacing and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely point as the Kale as a good entry point. But the Raging Kush is probably my favorite light that we have right now. That thing's just a monster. I really like that thing. Yeah.
When do your new ones come out?
What was that?
When do your new ones come out?
The new Kushes with the new drivers, they're going through a couple different redesigns right now. We're working on, as they're 4-foot by 4-foot lights, shipping and costs on that end, we're trying to get those reduced a little bit, especially with everything that's going on with shipping right now around the country, which you guys are all aware of. So that's getting redesigned often depending on what gets thrown at us, but we're really hoping to have the new Kush out by the end of the year. We just released our alphas and our Kales that are from here forward are going to have changeable plugs. So if you need a 20-foot cord or an 8-foot cord, we can accommodate that. So those new versions of those will be coming out shortly. But the new version of the Kush, we're hoping into the year, but it might be early 2021.
Cool. Last question, when it comes to spectrums, are you going to be able, so if you have a cultivar that's 8 weeks and the other half of your room is a cultivar 12 or something, whatever, would you be able to input that into the lights so it could automatically adjust that spectrum, but span it out between the difference? You know what I mean? Instead of me having to go in at week 3, okay, I'm going to change this. Week 6, I'm going to change it again. If you could just put your time span into the light or something, and it just does that automatically, in week 3 for the 8 week would probably be more week like 4 or 5 for the 12 week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. So, I mean, right now you could make those adjustments per row. So, I mean, basically, our lights you can group, but I'm sure you've seen that on the option. You can group up to 200 of these lights together. So, what we'll do is we'll put a group 1 has this recipe, group 5 has this recipe. So, if those 2 things are in the same room, they can run their individual recipes. A little bit of insight I can give you that we don't share very often, but since we're a small group, I'll share with you guys. Is we're working on it right now, a new option that's going to be a desktop option of the app where you can preset everything through a whole run that's going to be running, and you're going to be able to run multiple things, and you're going to be able to access that from anywhere. It won't have to be a Bluetooth adapted thing. It'll be a Wi-Fi available thing. So that's going to be huge for, what you're talking about, running each one of these rows on a different set. Yeah, so that's coming. That's something that we're in the works of doing right now.
Super cool. Oh my God. That's going to change the game for a lot of indoor growers right there.
Yeah. We're
just making their life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
My Lord. Exactly. Well, and that's half of it, right?
Yep. I mean, when it comes to production level growing, the more automation you can get, the price point is just there for you. The more money you can make at the end of the day, Luckily right now around the country, the prices per pound are up with everything that's been going on. I was, lucky enough or unfortunate enough to live through the Colorado spike and dip. And then I did the same thing in Oregon. I watched Oregon, we were getting $600 a pound for quality indoor, at some points in Oregon just because of the glut. So anytime you can reduce cost in production and automate, the better off you are.
Yeah, absolutely. That sets you up to where you can trudge through those types of,
exactly.
Incidents.
Yeah.
Or trends or whatever you'd call them.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we're not eating up a whole lot of your time here.
No, not at all. You guys are great.
Awesome. Now, did anybody have any other questions? I think we were going to go ahead and start wrapping it up. Does anyone have any questions before I go into my thing? No? Okay.
Okay, just real quick, just so everybody has it. It's if you go to the website and order anything for you guys, it's
that's what I was about to ask.
CSC LED, all one word, CSC LED, and that's just for you guys. And that's awesome. Coupon code. I think it's 10% off everything, but it'll definitely get you where you need to be.
When does it expire?
I'm not sure it has an expiration date. I think you guys will be good for a little while. I think you guys have an open window there.
Awesome.
Super cool.
I've got some time before I take my horticulture class to grow.
Excellent. Greg, you've been a wealth of information. I'm super glad you took the time to hang out with us today. Is there any word on when maybe we could get one of those raging cushions here in our flood table we got set up at the school?
I know our growth director of growth is talking to you guys and to get some fixtures in your guys' hands. I'm not really sure where that is, but I think it's coming your way for sure.
Super cool. Well, I definitely can't wait. And again, I was blessed to have the opportunity to talk to you. You just do the R&D, right? You don't go around to the stores or anything like that?
I've been out I'll go around to the stores. I mean, when we're not in what we're doing right now, I definitely been known to pop into hydro stores and, talk shop, especially with, some of the local stores. I've been doing this so long. It's just a wealth of info to kind of get in with the community and visit stores, and definitely something I still do for sure.
That's what I like to hear. Well, hopefully one day I'll see you in my shop. I work at Indoor Gardens here in Columbus. So
okay, sure. Yeah, no, well aware Indoor Gardens. Yeah, definitely. Yep. And hopefully we'll all be back out on the road here soon. Fingers crossed.
Let's hope, man. It's hurting a lot of people. That's for sure. Well, awesome, man. Before I go I'd like to get your contact information, but that's a separate conversation here. So if no one else had any other questions, I'll go ahead and end this meeting. Greg, I'm going to send you a private chat and send you my email. If you could just get a hold of me and just send me like your product catalog or even any materials I could possibly use in class, that would be super cool. I'd like to stay in contact with you.
For sure, yeah, and we do great deals for shops and dealers and stuff to get you on the science team. So I'll get you all that information too.
You're the man. I appreciate you again. Greg, you
Yeah.
have a good rest of your day, brother. I'll talk to you again soon. Let me send you this
Yeah.
before I screw around and forget.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you guys all for coming. This looks like one of the biggest turns out yet.
Yeah, thanks guys, appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank
Man.
you.
Hey, thank you guys for coming.
Take care, folks. Bye.
Bye-bye.